I was sitting quietly at the table next to my 7-year-old grandson, Ethan, at my son's second wedding in a grand hotel ballroom in Chicago. Suddenly, the boy grabbed my hand tightly and whispered, "Grandma, I want to leave right now." I looked at him, startled. "What's wrong, Ethan?" His small body trembled, and his clear eyes filled with fear. Then he said in a trembling voice, "Grandma, you didn't look under the table, did you?" I slowly lowered my gaze and froze. My chest tightened, my breath caught. I took Ethan's cold little hand, and together we rose in silence. My heart pounding louder than the music and laughter echoing through the glittering Chicago ballroom. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has reached. I was sitting in the middle of the wedding hall, a ballroom glowing with candlelight at the Chicago Hilton, right next to my little grandson, Ethan, the boy I loved more than life itself. Today was the wedding of my son, Daniel, to his second wife, Vanessa. My little Ethan was busy pushing his red toy car back and forth across the spotless white tablecloth. His clear eyes seemed immersed in a world of his own, a world where the laughter of the adults, the clinking of glasses, and the jazz music simply didn't exist. I looked at him, and my heart melted. I leaned down and carefully straightened the tiny bow tie around his neck, my fingers trembling slightly. That simple gesture felt as if I were caressing the memory of his mother, Emily, her tender smile still etched in my heart as vividly as if she were standing there beside us. The mellow notes of the jazz quartet drifted through the air, blending with the murmur of conversations and the soft clatter of silver cutlery. The ballroom had been decorated with lavish elegance, every table crowned with tall vases of pristine white lilies, every corner bathed in warm candlelight that reflected off gleaming silver plates and crystal glasses. The room sparkled, but for me, the beauty only deepened the shadows of unease lingering in my chest. I raised my head, searching for Daniel among the crowd. My son moved gracefully from table to table, offering toasts with a smile that shone as brightly as the chandeliers overhead. To the guests, it was the smile of a man reborn, a man who had found love again. But I knew better. Behind that radiant mask still lay the hollow silence left after Emily's death. Across the room, Vanessa stood in her glittering beaded gown, dazzling as if she were the star of a play. She posed for photographs with her friends, her smile flawless, her gestures rehearsed, her laughter so polished that it rang false in my ears. I told myself I was only being oversensitive, but something about her perfection unsettled me deeply. A mask that perfect could only hide something. Waiters glided between the tables with practiced elegance, refilling wine, clearing empty dishes, arranging napkins with mechanical precision. One carried a silver tray heavy with shrimp cocktails, their pink flesh glistening under the lights. My stomach twisted. Shrimp, of all things. Ethan's deadly allergy was no secret. A single bite could send him into shock. I turned quickly to see if any had been placed before him. Thankfully, his plate was untouched, save for a single cracker he had pushed carefully aside, as if the rest of the food was too dangerous to trust. At that moment, an elderly couple at our table leaned toward me with kind smiles. "How fast Ethan is growing, Margaret," the woman said warmly. "How old is he now?" I forced a smile, though my heart was uneasy. He just turned 7. Time flies so quickly. To keep my hands busy, I cut a small piece of cake and placed it gently onto Ethan's plate. He glanced up at me, gratitude flickering in his eyes, then quickly lowered his head again. His small fingers guided his toy car back and forth across the linen, as though that little toy was his only safe refuge in this world of glitter and masks. And then, he stopped. The toy car froze mid-roll. His round eyes widened, fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. His little hands trembled, and then he reached for me, gripping my arm with a force far too strong for his tiny frame. His skin was ice cold. In an urgent, breaking whisper, he said, "Grandma, I want to leave right now." My heart jolted. The music and laughter around us faded to a distant hum. I bent close, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's wrong, my boy? Tell me." Ethan's lips quivered as he pressed them tightly together. He shuddered, his whole body taut with fear. Finally, he leaned toward my ear, so close I could feel his shaky breath against my cheek, and whispered words that pierced through me like a knife. "Grandma, you didn't look under the table, did you?" For a moment the world stood still. I froze in my chair, my pulse pounding in my throat. Slowly, with a hand that felt as heavy as lead, I reached for the edge of the white linen, ready to lift it, though every nerve in my body screamed that I might not want to see what was hiding in the shadows beneath. The weight of that whisper still pressed against my chest as I let the tablecloth fall back into place. The room around me, glittering, golden, alive with laughter, seemed unreal, like a painted backdrop hiding something sinister just behind the canvas. The jazz quartet played a lilting tune that melted into the hum of conversation. Waiters glided about, their trays shimmering with crystal flutes and hors d'oeuvres. At another table, guests raised their glasses, toasting Daniel and Vanessa as if this day marked the rebirth of joy after years of sorrow. But my heart pounded with unease. I turned to look for my son. Daniel stood near the dais, laughing warmly, his hand on a guest's shoulder, his other hand holding a champagne flute. His face glowed, his smile broad, too broad. To strangers, it was a man's happiness. To me, it was a mask stretched thin over wounds that had never healed. My gaze drifted further, landing on Vanessa. She sparkled like a jewel in the center of the room, her beaded gown catching every flicker of light, her wine glass never empty. She posed for photo after photo, her lips curving into flawless smiles that looked carved rather than lived. She leaned into her bridesmaids with the easy grace of a woman who believed the world belonged to her. And yet, when her eyes flicked toward our table, just for a heartbeat, her smile faltered. It was so quick that no one else would have noticed. But I saw it, a tightening around her mouth, a glint too sharp in her eyes, like a blade catching light. I shivered, and for a moment I thought, she knows something. She's waiting for something. The waiter returned, setting down plates. Shrimp skewers glistened, their scent rising heavy into the air. My stomach clenched. The note Ethan had found, "Add shrimp to the child's plate," burned in my mind like fire. I slid my arm around his small shoulders, pulling him close. His little chest rose and fell quickly, his fingers still wrapped around his toy car like it was a shield. Beside us, the elderly couple smiled again, oblivious. "He's such a handsome boy," the man said kindly. "Just like his father at that age." I forced a polite smile, though the muscles in my face felt frozen. I answered softly, "Yes, but Ethan is more sensitive than his father ever was." I stroked his hair, my eyes never leaving Vanessa. She raised her glass for another toast, her laughter ringing out clear. But even as she laughed, she scanned the room, her gaze skipping from the guests to the waiters, to the head table where the main dishes waited to be served. And then, as if sensing my stare, her eyes locked on mine. For a fraction of a second, it was as though the music dropped away. Her smile did not reach her eyes. There was something cold there, something that sent a chill down my spine. She tilted her head just slightly, her glass still raised, her lips still painted with that perfect grin. I looked away quickly, my pulse racing. My instincts screamed, the same instincts that had carried me through sleepless nights with Emily, through the loss of her, through every fever and cry of Ethan's childhood. Those instincts had never failed me, and tonight, they were telling me that beneath the chandeliers and the laughter, danger lurked. "Grandma," Ethan whispered again, his voice shaking. "Can we go home?" "Please," I squeezed his hand. "Not yet, my love. Not yet," I whispered back, though I wasn't sure if I was trying to comfort him or myself. The band played louder, the guests cheered as Daniel and Vanessa stepped to the center for another round of photos. Cameras flashed, the bride's gown glittered brighter than ever, and for a moment the whole ballroom seemed swept up in their radiance. But my eyes returned to the plates being set before the guests. The shrimp gleamed red against porcelain. I noticed one of the waiters pause at our table, a small folded napkin in his hand. His smile was polite, but there was something uneasy in the way he quickly looked away after setting down the plate. My throat went dry. Every movement in the room suddenly seemed heavy with meaning. The clink of a spoon, the whisper of a chair, the rustle of satin. I felt as though invisible strings were pulling everything towards some unseen climax. And then, across the room, I caught it again, Vanessa watching us. Her lips curled into the faintest smile, and for a heartbeat I thought I saw satisfaction there. I drew Ethan closer, my hand trembling as I stroked his hair. Something terrible was woven into this celebration. The laughter and music were nothing but a veil, and deep inside me, dread whispered louder than the jazz. This night was only just beginning. The candlelight shimmered across the ballroom, but my mind drifted far away from the glitter and music. Ethan's trembling hand in mine pulled me back into a place I thought I had sealed long ago, a place filled with laughter, sunlight, and the tender voice of a woman who should still be here. Emily. I could still see her as if it were yesterday, standing on the porch of their little house in the suburbs of Phoenix, a wicker basket of vegetables cradled in her arms, her smile soft and radiant beneath the golden afternoon sky. She had the kind of presence that quieted storms. One look from her, and the weight of the world seemed lighter. In those days, Daniel's laughter rang out easily. He would come home from work and sweep Emily into his arms, his eyes full of the kind of devotion that made me believe their love was unbreakable. I would visit often, bringing small gifts, just to see the way Emily's face lit up when she welcomed me inside. She never made me feel like an outsider. To me, she was not just a daughter-in-law. She was the daughter I had always wished for. And then, there was little Ethan, barely old enough to walk, chasing a colorful rubber ball across the grass in the backyard, while his mother's gentle voice drifted through the kitchen window. "Mom, Margaret, try the chili I made. Tell me if it needs more spice," she would call, her voice brimming with pride as she set a steaming bowl before me. I would sit at their small wooden table, spoon in hand, watching her fuss over the meal with the quiet joy of a woman who loved deeply. But it was not always sunlight. I remembered the night when Ethan burned with fever, his little body trembling, his eyes barely open. Emily held him in her arms, tears streaming silently down her face. "I'm so scared, Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking as she pressed a damp cloth to his forehead. I sat beside her all night, holding her hand, assuring her that Ethan was strong, that he would pull through. And when the fever finally broke at dawn, Emily turned to me with red-rimmed eyes and whispered, "Thank you. Without you, I don't know what I would have done." Moments like those carved themselves into my soul. I believed their small family would live in that harmony forever, like a song without end. But fate has a cruel way of silencing songs. It was a warm afternoon when the phone rang. I had been standing at my kitchen sink, rinsing dishes, when the cold voice of a police officer pierced the air. "Mrs. Williams, we regret to inform you." I didn't hear the rest. My hands shook so violently that I dropped a plate, and it shattered against the floor like my heart. Emily was gone. A truck had lost control on the highway just outside the city. In a single instant, her laughter, her tenderness, her entire future was erased. Her funeral fell on a day of torrential rain, as though the heavens themselves wept for her. I clutched Ethan tightly in my arms. He was only 4, too young to grasp the meaning of death. "Grandma, where's Mommy?" he asked, his small voice trembling against my chest. I swallowed my grief, pressing my lips to his damp hair. "She's in a beautiful place, my love," I whispered, though inside I felt as though I were breaking into pieces. Daniel collapsed in front of the coffin, his shoulders shaking with sobs, his gaze empty, his soul fractured. He tried to be strong in the days that followed, but the man who once laughed so easily was gone. He buried himself in work, leaving early, coming home late, as if hours at the office could fill the vast emptiness Emily had left behind. And Ethan, my sweet boy, was left adrift. He grew quieter, his bright eyes shadowed with sadness. He stopped asking questions about the world and started asking only for stories of his mother. "Grandma, tell me about Mommy again," he would plead, curling beside me in bed. So I told him how she sang him to sleep, how she cut his fruit into tiny pieces, how she smiled when he ran across the grass. I told those stories with a voice that often cracked, but I told them anyway, because they were all I had to keep her alive for him. In those long years, Grace, my adopted daughter, became our lifeline. She would bring coloring books, cookies she had baked, and sit with Ethan for hours, guiding his small hands across pages. "Look, Ethan, your house looks better than mine," she would laugh, her clear voice like a bell. She loved him as fiercely as if he were her own brother, and in her presence, the flame of family flickered against the darkness. But no matter how hard we tried, the void remained. Every time I looked at Ethan's sleeping face, I saw Emily's features in miniature, and my heart would break all over again. Now, sitting in the glittering ballroom years later, holding Ethan's trembling hand, those memories came crashing back. The scent of lilies and candle wax mixed with the ghost of chili simmering in Emily's kitchen. The sound of laughter in the hall clashed with the memory of Daniel's broken sobs by her coffin. And as Vanessa's laughter rang across the room, cold and perfect, I thought to myself, how could anyone ever replace Emily? After Emily's death, the walls of Daniel's home felt emptier than ever. The photographs of her, smiling in the garden, holding Ethan on her hip, standing beside Daniel on their wedding day, remained in their frames. But the warmth they once radiated turned into silent reminders of what had been stolen from us. Daniel threw himself into his work at the law firm, as though the longer hours might erase his grief. He would leave early in the morning, his tie crooked, his gaze heavy, and return late at night, exhausted and hollow. Sometimes I would catch a glimpse of him standing at the doorway of Ethan's bedroom, looking at his son curled beneath the blankets. But instead of stepping inside, he would turn away, his footsteps fading into the dark. I knew he was running, from pain, from memories, from himself. But in his absence, Ethan carried the weight. My little boy grew quieter with each passing month. Once, he would chatter endlessly about toy cars, about birds in the backyard, about stories Emily used to tell him. Now he barely spoke. His wide eyes, once bright with curiosity, often stared off into nothing, as though he was waiting for someone who would never return. At school, his teachers pulled me aside, concern etched on their faces. "Mrs. Williams, he doesn't play with the other children anymore. He sits alone. He's too young to be this withdrawn." I would nod, forcing a smile, promising I would talk to him. But inside, I felt the ache of helplessness. It was Grace who saved us. Grace, my adopted daughter, had always been gentle, but in those dark years she became a light. She would show up at our door with coloring books tucked under her arm, or with batches of cookies still warm from the oven. She sat with Ethan at the kitchen table, guiding his small hands as he scribbled with crayons. "Look, Ethan, your house is prettier than mine," she would say, her laughter ringing like a bell. Slowly, the corners of his mouth would twitch upward, if only for a second. She became his companion in ways neither Daniel nor I could manage. She read to him, played board games with him, even taught him how to tie his shoelaces. On afternoons when Daniel stayed late at the office, I would peek into the living room to find Grace and Ethan sprawled on the floor, building towers from wooden blocks. When the towers toppled, Grace would clap her hands in mock despair, and Ethan's small laugh, a laugh I thought I might never hear again, would break through. And yet, beneath those moments of joy, I could still see the shadows. At night, Ethan would crawl into my bed, clutching his toy car against his chest. "Grandma, tell me about Mommy again," he would whisper. And I would. Every story I told was both a lifeline and a dagger, keeping Emily's memory alive while reopening wounds that had never closed. Daniel, meanwhile, grew more distant. Though I knew he loved his son, guilt and sorrow weighed on him so heavily that he seemed paralyzed. He avoided family dinners, claimed the office needed him, and left Grace and me to keep the household flame alive. But Grace never complained. She took Ethan's small hand in hers, patient and steady, as though she had been placed in his life for this very reason. The bond between them grew so strong that sometimes I would watch from the kitchen doorway, unseen, and whisper a silent prayer of thanks. Still, I worried. A family held together by two women, and a child's fragile smile could not endure forever. Daniel had to come back to us, or the cracks would widen until even Grace's light could not keep the darkness at bay. One evening, I heard Ethan murmur to Grace while she tucked him into bed, Aunt Grace, I wish you were my mommy. My heart clenched at the words. Grace kissed his forehead, her eyes glistening though she forced a smile. I'm not your mommy, love, but I'll always be here. I turned away, tears burning my eyes, because I knew Ethan's heart had spoken the truth, and so, when Daniel finally brought Vanessa home one evening, a dazzling young woman in a silk dress, her smile polished and perfect, I realized the fragile balance we had built was about to be tested. That evening, when Daniel first brought Vanessa home, I was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of chili the way Emily used to. The aroma of spices filled the air, comforting and familiar. I heard the door open and Daniel's voice, brighter than it had been in years. Mom, he called, his voice trembling with something I hadn't heard in so long. Hope. There's someone I want you to meet. I wiped my hands on my apron, my heart caught between nerves and cautious joy. Perhaps Daniel had finally found someone who could help heal him. Someone who might care for Ethan the way Emily once had. When I stepped into the living room, Vanessa was standing there, framed by the doorway light. Her dress was pale blue silk that shimmered with every movement. Her dark hair fell in polished waves, her lips painted a delicate rose. And her smile, it was dazzling, the kind of smile that had been rehearsed in mirrors, meant to win anyone over. It's such a pleasure to meet you. Mrs. Williams, she said, her voice smooth as honey, tilting her head with practiced sweetness. I returned her smile politely and invited her in. I poured coffee into porcelain cups, setting them carefully on the table. Welcome to our home, I said. Her eyes roamed the room as she sipped her drink, lingering on the photographs along the wall. One in particular caught her attention, Emily, holding a very small Ethan in her arms, both of them laughing in the sunlight. Vanessa's smile didn't falter, but her gaze lingered a heartbeat too long, and I felt a strange chill crawl up my spine. Dinner that night was quiet. The table set with tacos and enchiladas, Ethan's favorites. Daniel sat beside Vanessa, his eyes never leaving her. His happiness glowed so brightly that I almost wanted to believe. Mom, Daniel said proudly. Vanessa works in marketing at my firm. She's one of the best. Vanessa laughed lightly, touching Daniel's arm as though to punctuate his words. Then she turned to me, sliding an enchilada onto my plate. This is delicious. You'll have to teach me your recipes, she said, her tone gracious. I smiled, but unease stirred beneath the surface. Her gestures were smooth, polished, too polished, as though every movement was part of a performance. Across the table, Ethan sat unusually quiet. Normally, he would chatter about his day at school or beg for extra helpings of his favorite dish. But that night, he barely touched his food. His small hands twisted in his lap, and his gaze never once met Vanessa's. Noticing, Vanessa reached into her purse and pulled out a chocolate bar. She set it on the table before him with a radiant smile. This is for you, Ethan. You'll like it. The boy didn't move. His little fingers gripped his fork tightly, his knuckles white. He turned his face away, refusing to even look at the candy. Daniel frowned, about to scold him. Ethan, that's not polite. Vanessa is being kind. I quickly placed a hand on his arm. It's nothing, son. He's just tired. Daniel sighed and leaned back, brushing it off. But I couldn't ignore the way Ethan's small shoulders tensed. From across the table, Grace sat quietly, watching. I saw her eyes darken when Vanessa reached under the table to squeeze Daniel's hand. Grace's fingers tightened around her glass, though she said nothing. The silence was heavier than words. After dinner, Vanessa insisted on helping with the dishes. She rolled up her sleeves, humming cheerfully as she cleaned the plates with efficiency. I watched her closely. She was flawless, too flawless. Later, when I returned to the living room, Ethan was at the coffee table with his crayons, coloring quietly. Vanessa bent down beside him, her voice sweet. You draw so well, Ethan. What is it? Show me. But Ethan froze. He dropped the crayon and leaned back, his face wary, his eyes darting toward me like a silent plea. Vanessa forced a laugh and glanced at me. What a shy boy, she said lightly. Yet for a fraction of a second, something sharp flickered in her eyes, something I could not unsee. Daniel, oblivious, poured another glass of wine and told a story from work. Laughing loudly, I stood there, my heart heavy. Everything about Vanessa was perfect, her looks, her manners, her laughter. But perfection can be the most dangerous mask of all. And as I watched Ethan shrink from her touch, my unease grew into something darker. Fear. At first, I told myself I was being unfair. Vanessa was new, still adjusting, perhaps uncertain how to approach a child who had suffered so much. I repeated that excuse in my head for weeks. But as the days turned into months, small cracks began to show, so faint that anyone else might have missed them. But I couldn't. One Saturday morning, Daniel was working late at the office, and I was in the kitchen preparing chili for lunch. The scent of cumin and garlic filled the air when I heard Vanessa's voice from the living room. "Sit still, Ethan. Don't make a mess. You're 7 now. Stop acting like a baby." The sharpness in her tone stopped me mid-chop, the knife hovering above the onion. My chest tightened. I stepped quietly to the doorway. By the time I entered the room, Vanessa's voice had softened, dripping with sweetness. "Our Ethan is so clever. Look at that tower of blocks you built," she exclaimed, clapping her hands. Ethan's lips were pressed tight. His eyes flicked to me wide, searching for help. My heart clenched. I forced a smile, trying to protect him with reassurance. Yes, he's very skilled. But inside, unease gnawed at me. The next week, we celebrated Ethan's 7th birthday. Grace had spent the morning baking a chocolate cake, frosting it with care, lighting the candles herself. When she set it on the table, Ethan's face lit up for the first time in months. "Aunt Grace, this is my favorite," he cried, rushing into her arms. She laughed, brushing his hair back tenderly. "I made it just for you, sweetheart." The room warmed with his joy. But in the corner, Vanessa clapped half-heartedly, her smile tight, her eyes cool. Her only gift was a pat on Ethan's shoulder and a quick, "Happy birthday, champ." I watched Ethan shrink back, his shoulders curling inward. My heart ached, but I stayed silent. It was his day, and I didn't want to cast shadows over it. Not long after, Daniel took Vanessa and Ethan to the grocery store. I stayed behind. When they returned, Vanessa's voice cut through the hallway, sharp and irritated. He dropped a whole bag of candy at the checkout, and I had to pay for it. "Honestly, Daniel, he's so clumsy." I froze. Daniel frowned, scolding lightly. "Ethan, you're a big boy now. You need to be more careful." Ethan lowered his head, his small hands twisting together. His eyes found mine, pleading silently. I rushed forward, laying a hand on his shoulder. "It's just candy, my love. Nothing more." But Vanessa rolled her eyes. "He needs to learn responsibility," she muttered, just low enough for me to hear. At school, the signs grew clearer. One afternoon, Ethan's teacher, Mrs. Davis, pulled me aside with a worried frown. "Mrs. Williams, I'm concerned. Ethan speaks less and less in class. He doesn't join group activities. He seems afraid. Is something happening at home?" I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. "It's just the changes. He'll adjust. Don't worry." But on the way home, Ethan tugged at my sleeve. His little voice trembled. "Grandma, I don't want to go home with Miss Vanessa." My heart sank. I knelt to meet his eyes. "Why, sweetheart?" "Miss Vanessa cares about you." The words felt bitter even as I spoke them. Ethan shook his head firmly. "No, she doesn't love me." His voice was steady, clear. It was the kind of truth children speak without hesitation. I stroked his hair, forcing a soothing smile, though inside my chest burned with rage and fear. Grace had heard him too. She stood a few steps away, her face pale, her lips pressed tight as though she were holding back words she couldn't yet say. She turned her back quickly, but I saw the faint tremor in her shoulders. All these small moments, the sharp words, the cold smile, the way Ethan shrank in her presence, they weren't coincidences. I had seen them. I had ignored them. But now, standing in the street with Ethan clutching my hand, I knew I could no longer pretend. Vanessa's mask was slipping, and beneath it something dark was waiting. The evening before the wedding, the house was quiet, except for the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. I had spent the day fussing over Ethan's little navy blue suit, pressing the fabric, polishing his shoes until they shone. Anything to keep my hands busy, to keep the unease from gnawing at me. Daniel had left earlier with Vanessa, off to finalize last-minute details at the Chicago Hilton Ballroom. When he kissed Ethan's forehead before leaving, his smile was wide, but his eyes were restless, almost desperate. He wanted this new beginning so badly that he could no longer see the shadows gathering around him. That night, I tucked Ethan into bed, his toy car clutched against his chest as always. I smoothed his hair and kissed his warm forehead. "Sleep well, my love. Tomorrow is a big day." His little hand reached out, clutching mine. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice trembling in the dark. "I don't want her to be my mom." The words hit me harder than any blow. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I stroked his hand gently, trying to soothe him. "Shh, it's all right, Ethan. You don't have to be afraid." But his eyes, wide and unblinking, searched mine. "She doesn't love me. She only smiles when Daddy looks. When he leaves, she's different." I swallowed the knot in my throat. I had seen it too. And yet I had forced myself to push it away, telling myself I was overprotective, imagining things. But hearing it from Ethan, spoken with such clarity, left no room for doubt. After he drifted into a restless sleep, I walked into the kitchen for a glass of water. That was when I heard it. Vanessa's voice, sharp and hushed, seeping through the crack in the door leading to the porch. "Yes. Tomorrow everything changes," she said. A pause, then a low laugh. "Don't worry. No one will know." I froze, the glass trembling in my hand. My pulse thudded in my ears. I moved closer, pressing myself against the wall, straining to hear. "Daniel trusts me completely," she continued, her tone silky but laced with steel. "And that boy, he won't be a problem for much longer." The words slammed into me like cold iron. I nearly dropped the glass. A car horn honked outside, startling her. I heard the shuffle of her heels across the porch and the quick slam of the door as she slipped back into the night. I stayed rooted in the kitchen, my breath shallow, my hands trembling. My mind spun with questions. Who was she speaking to? What did she mean about Ethan? I wanted to wake Daniel right then, shake him until he saw the truth. But I knew it would be useless. His heart was blinded by hope, desperate to bury the ghost of Emily with a future that glittered only on the surface. If I pushed too hard, he would retreat further, defending Vanessa with all the stubbornness of a man clinging to his last chance at happiness. Instead, I walked back to Ethan's room. He stirred in his sleep, whimpering softly. I sat on the edge of his bed, brushing his hair back from his damp forehead. His small face, so fragile, mirrored Emily's features so perfectly it nearly broke me. "Don't worry, my love," I whispered. "Grandma's here. I'll protect you." But even as I spoke, dread coiled in my chest. The celebration tomorrow was supposed to be filled with laughter, music, and light. Yet I felt it in my bones. Something dark waited in that ballroom. I stayed by Ethan's side the rest of the night, unable to close my eyes. Every creak of the house, every sigh of the wind made me flinch. And all the while, Vanessa's words echoed in my ears. Tomorrow, everything changes. The golden afternoon sun of Chicago poured through the tall ballroom windows, scattering light across crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. Guests in satin gowns and tailored suits filled the hall with laughter, raising glasses high as the jazz band played a triumphant tune. The wedding of my son, Daniel, had begun in full splendor. I sat at table 6, Ethan on one side, Grace on the other. My heart thudded with the rhythm of the music, but not from joy. The words I had overheard from Vanessa the night before echoed in my mind like a curse. Tomorrow, everything changes. The boy won't be a problem for much longer. Ethan fiddled nervously with his red toy car, pushing it in tiny circles on the tablecloth. His little bow tie sat slightly crooked despite my careful hands that morning. He didn't look up, his small fingers gripping the toy as if it were a lifeline. "Eat a little bread, sweetheart," Grace whispered, breaking off a piece of roll and placing it gently on his plate. Her calm voice soothed him for a moment, and I managed a grateful smile. Daniel moved from table to table, his navy blue suit sharp, his face glowing as he toasted guests. His radiant smile painted the picture of a man whose life had been restored, but I saw the cracks behind it, the hollow ache that no celebration could truly erase. At the center of it all stood Vanessa, shimmering in her beaded gown, every flash of the camera catching her practiced smile. She held her wine glass as though it were a scepter, her laughter carrying above the din like a bell. She leaned close to guests, whispered jokes, charmed the crowd effortlessly. To them, she was dazzling. To me, she was a predator, cloaked in glitter. The waiters began to serve the first course. Silver trays slid onto tables with delicate seafood appetizers. Shrimp, of course, their pink shells gleaming under the candlelight. My stomach tightened. I turned immediately to Ethan. His eyes widened as the plate was set before him. Slowly, almost instinctively, he pushed the dish away, his little hand trembling as if even its nearness terrified him. I bent closer, my voice low. "Don't touch it, my love. Grandma's watching." From across the room, I felt her gaze. Vanessa. She was laughing with a group of bridesmaids, her wine glass lifted, her white teeth gleaming. But her eyes were fixed on my table. Just for a second, her smile tightened, her gaze narrowing like a dagger aimed straight at me. I looked away, pulling Ethan closer, my hand resting protectively on his small back. The music swelled. The guests clapped as Daniel raised his glass for another toast. But for me, the ballroom was suffocating. Every shimmer of light, every cheerful laugh felt like a veil covering something sinister. A waiter approached our table again, carrying a folded napkin in one hand. He moved quickly, too quickly, as though trying not to be noticed. My breath caught as he laid the napkin near Ethan's plate. I reached for it, my fingers brushing the soft fabric, and felt the weight of something inside. My pulse raced. My mind screamed. I forced my face to remain calm, but inside I was unraveling. The note Ethan had found yesterday, the shrimp, the strange phone call. It was all converging now. Ethan looked up at me, his wide eyes full of fear. His little voice trembled. "Grandma, is it happening again?" I swallowed hard, unable to answer. My hands clenched in my lap. Grace's hand slipped under the table, resting firmly on mine, her silent strength telling me I wasn't alone. Across the room, Vanessa raised her glass high. "To love, to new beginnings," she declared, her voice ringing through the ballroom. Guests erupted in cheers, glasses clinking, but her eyes never left Ethan. And for a fleeting second, I swore I saw triumph flash in them. The room spun around me, my breath shallow. The feast was only beginning, but I knew, deep in my bones, that this night would not end in celebration. It would end in revelation. The laughter in the ballroom swelled as the waiters weaved between tables, refilling glasses and laying down plates. From a distance, it looked like a dream. Golden chandeliers, the fragrance of roses, and music that floated like silk through the air. But at table 6, my world had shrunk to a single object, the folded napkin I had just touched. I slid it discreetly beneath my palm, my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the guests could hear it over the jazz band. My fingers trembled as I opened it beneath the cover of the table. Inside, a small piece of paper fell into my lap. My throat tightened as I unfolded it. The words were hastily scrawled, jagged, as if written in secrecy. "Table 6, add shrimp to the child's plate." The air vanished from my lungs. My blood turned cold. I gripped the paper so tightly it crumpled in my fist. My gaze shot to Ethan, my sweet boy, oblivious, still running his little car across the tablecloth, humming softly to himself. I thought of his allergy, of the nights Emily had stayed awake with him in fever, of how fragile his life was. A single bite could take him from me forever. I looked up, scanning the ballroom. Daniel was across the room, laughing with colleagues, his smile radiant, blind. And there, near the bar, stood Vanessa. She raised her glass, her beaded gown shimmering like fire. To the others, she was breathtaking. But when her eyes met mine, her smile faltered just slightly, tight at the corners, as though she already knew what I had found. Rage and terror clashed in my chest. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. But Ethan's small hand reached for mine beneath the table, trembling, his voice barely a whisper. "Grandma, you saw it, didn't you?" I squeezed his hand, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "Stay close to me, sweetheart." Grace noticed too. Her eyes darted to the paper in my fist, then to Vanessa. She leaned in, her whisper sharp with urgency. "You can't stay silent. Not this time." My chair screeched against the marble floor as I stood. The sudden sound sliced through the music. Conversations hushed, laughter ebbed. The entire ballroom turned toward me as I raised the paper with a trembling but unyielding hand. "Before anyone eats," I said, my voice carrying, stronger than I thought possible, "I need to know who wrote this." A heavy silence fell, broken only by the clink of a dropped fork. Guests craned their necks, eyes darting between me and Vanessa, confusion spreading like ripples across a pond. Daniel hurried over, alarm on his face. "Mom, what's going on?" I thrust the paper toward him, my hand shaking. "Read it, Daniel. Read what they wanted to do to your son." He took it, frowning, his eyes scanning the words. His face drained of color, his hand trembling. This must be a mistake." He turned to me, bewildered, desperate. "Who would—" Vanessa appeared at his side, her perfect smile plastered back into place, though I saw the flicker of panic in her eyes. "This is ridiculous," she said lightly, her laugh brittle. "Someone is playing a cruel joke." I met her gaze, my own voice cold. "A joke? My grandson is deathly allergic to shrimp." "This is no joke, it's attempted murder," gasps erupted around the room. Whispers surged like a storm. "Murder? Poison? The child?" Daniel looked between us, his chest heaving. "Vanessa, tell me this isn't true." She clutched his arm, her face twisting into feigned outrage. "Of course it's not true. Why would I ever hurt Ethan? He's like my own." But Ethan, still clutching his toy car, spoke for the first time that night. His small voice trembled, yet it carried across the silence. "She doesn't love me. She only smiles when Daddy looks. She scares me." The room froze. All eyes fell on Vanessa, her smile cracked. Just for a second, Grace stood, her arms wrapping protectively around Ethan. Her voice shook, but was laced with fury. "We can check the cameras. Every corner of this ballroom has them. If you're innocent, Vanessa, you won't mind." Vanessa's face went pale, her hand tightening on Daniel's arm. "Don't be ridiculous," she snapped, her tone sharp for the first time, slipping past the mask. The whispers swelled into open murmurs. Guests shook their heads, muttering. Someone near the back hissed, "Who would endanger a child?" Daniel's hand trembled as he held the paper again. His eyes, once blind with hope, now flickered with doubt, with horror. And in that moment, as silence descended once more, I knew the ballroom had shifted. The mask of perfection was cracking, and beneath it, the truth was clawing its way to the surface. But this was only the beginning. The ballroom had fallen into a suffocating silence. The paper trembled in Daniel's hand, his eyes fixed on the jagged words that could have killed his son. Vanessa stood beside him, her perfect mask slipping, her smile gone stiff and brittle. Whispers hissed across the tables like sparks catching dry leaves. Murder. Shrimp, the child? I felt Ethan's tiny fingers gripping mine under the table. His toy car slipped from his lap, clattering softly onto the marble floor. He didn't move to pick it up. His eyes, wide with fear, never left Vanessa. Daniel's voice cracked. "Vanessa, please, tell me this isn't true." Vanessa drew in a sharp breath, pressing a hand to her chest as if she were the victim. "This is absurd," she said, her voice high, trembling but controlled. "Someone planted that note to destroy us. Can't you see? It's jealousy. It's envy. Who here wouldn't want to ruin a wedding as perfect as ours?" Her eyes flicked, too quickly, toward Grace, who stood with her arms wrapped around Ethan like a shield. The implication was clear. Gasps rose from the guests, some nodding in confusion, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Grace's eyes flashed, and she stepped forward, her voice ringing. "Don't you dare point at me. I'd give my life for this boy. Unlike you." Vanessa's painted smile twitched, but before she could reply, another voice cut through the air. A trembling younger voice. I gave the note." The room turned in unison. At the far corner, near a cluster of bridesmaids, stood Gloria, Vanessa's younger sister. Barely 18, her face pale, her hands shaking as she clutched her clutch bag to her chest. Tears welled in her wide eyes, gasps rippled through the room. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered, echoing the confession. Vanessa spun around, her face draining of color. "Gloria, what are you doing?" Her voice was sharp, laced with panic. Gloria's lips trembled. She took a hesitant step forward, then another, until she stood in the center of the ballroom. She told me to do it, she whispered, pointing at her sister. Vanessa gave me the paper. She said it was just a kitchen note for the chef. I didn't know. I didn't know it would hurt Ethan. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. She told her sister? The bride herself? Daniel staggered back, his hand falling from Vanessa's arm as though her touch burned him. Is that true? His voice cracked like glass. Vanessa's eyes blazed. She lunged toward her sister, hissing through clenched teeth. Shut up, Gloria. Don't make up lies to ruin me on my wedding day. Gloria flinched, tears spilling down her cheeks. I'm not lying. You made me do it. Her sobs rang like bells, raw and unrestrained. The guests watched in horror, the perfect facade of the evening collapsing before their eyes. I stepped forward, my voice steady, though my heart raced. Gloria, look at me. She turned, her eyes filled with guilt. Did you give this note to the waiter? She nodded, her chin quivering. Yes, I swear, I didn't understand. I thought it was just part of the meal. But when I saw Ethan's plate, when I heard the word shrimp, her voice broke, collapsing into sobs. Daniel's hands trembled violently, the paper slipping from his grasp. His gaze snapped to Vanessa. How could you? How could you endanger my son? Vanessa's mask shattered. Her voice, sharp and venomous, cut through the hall. Because you were never supposed to choose them over me. That boy, that little reminder of Emily, he stands between us every single day. A collective gasp spread across the room. Guests rose to their feet, shocked. Grace tightened her grip on Ethan, shielding him from the venom in Vanessa's words. I felt my entire body go cold. The truth was laid bare, cruel and undeniable. Daniel's face crumpled, his chest heaving. His voice was hoarse. You would rather kill my child than live with my love for him? Vanessa's lips parted, but no excuse came. The silence that followed was heavier than any words she could have spoken. For the first time, the entire ballroom saw her, not the dazzling bride, not the perfect hostess, but the woman who had nearly murdered an innocent child for her own pride, and the weight of that truth would destroy everything. The ballroom was no longer a place of celebration. The chandeliers still glittered above, the roses still perfumed the air, but joy had evaporated, leaving behind only gasps, whispers, and the heavy silence of truth. Vanessa stood at the center of it all, her wedding gown gleaming like shattered glass under the lights. Her painted smile was gone, replaced by twisted fury. At her side, Gloria sobbed uncontrollably, her trembling confession still echoing in everyone's ears. Daniel's face was ashen, his eyes hollow. He clutched the crumpled note in his hand, his knuckles white, his entire body trembling. How could you? His voice cracked, raw with anguish. Vanessa, how could you do this to my son? To Ethan? Vanessa's lips curled, her mask gone completely. Because you were never mine. She spat, her voice shaking with rage. Every time I looked at you, I saw her, Emily, and that boy, her ghost clinging to your life. I was supposed to be your future, but instead, I was living in her shadow. The guests recoiled, shocked murmurs spreading like fire. She admitted it. She admitted everything. Ethan pressed closer into Grace's arms, his little body trembling. Grace's voice, cold but resolute, cut through the chaos. You call that love? Endangering a child? That isn't love. It's cruelty, Vanessa's eyes snapped to her, blazing. You've always wanted him, haven't you? Playing the saint, taking care of Ethan, making Daniel look at you like you were some savior. Gasps rose again. All eyes turned to Grace, but she did not falter. She held Ethan tighter, her chin lifting with quiet strength. I never wanted anything but to protect this family. Something you were never capable of. I stepped forward, my voice firm though my heart hammered in my chest. Enough. We all see who you are, Vanessa. You can't hide anymore. Daniel's eyes brimmed with tears. He turned slowly to face the crowd, his voice breaking as he addressed not just her, but every guest who had witnessed the unraveling. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, he said hoarsely. But instead, it has revealed the darkest truth. Vanessa tried to hurt my son, my only child, and I will never forgive that. The ballroom erupted, some guests shaking their heads in disgust, others whispering angrily. How could she? At a wedding? That poor boy. Vanessa's chest heaved. You're all blind! He never loved me. He only kept me because of pity. Because of that child. Stop! Daniel's roar silenced her. His voice cracked, filled with years of grief and the final shattering of illusions. You don't get to say his name. Ethan is my son, my blood, my future. And you would have destroyed him. He tore the crumpled note in half, his hands shaking. The sound echoed louder than the music ever had. He turned to the hotel staff at the edge of the room. Escort her out. She doesn't belong here. 2 security men stepped forward, their faces grim. They moved toward Vanessa, who backed away, her eyes wild. No, you can't do this to me. I was supposed to be his wife. This was supposed to be my life. She thrashed as they took her arms, her voice breaking into sobs that were more rage than sorrow. You'll regret this, all of you. You'll regret it. But no one moved to defend her. The guests stood frozen, some covering their mouths, others shaking their heads. And then slowly, they parted, creating a clear path to the door. Vanessa was dragged down that path, her gown trailing like a fallen crown, her cries fading into the hallway. Silence reigned once more. Daniel dropped to his knees in front of Ethan, tears streaming down his face. He gathered his son into his arms, clutching him tightly. I'm so sorry, my boy, he whispered, his voice breaking. I should have protected you. Forgive me. Ethan buried his face in his father's chest, whispering softly, I just want Mommy back. Daniel's shoulders shook, and for the first time I saw my son broken completely, but also beginning to heal. I placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder, my voice steady though my eyes burned with tears. What matters is that Ethan is safe, that we still have each other. That's more than enough. The guests, once silent, began to murmur again, but this time it was with sympathy, with respect. Some even clapped softly, not for the wedding, but for the truth that had been defended. And as I stood there, Ethan safe in Grace's arms, Daniel's tears soaking his son's hair, I knew the night had ended not with love as Vanessa defined it, but with something far stronger, survival, truth, and family. But I also knew this was not the end. The wounds she left would linger, and tomorrow we would face them together. The ballroom emptied slowly that night. The music had long since stopped. The roses had begun to wilt under the weight of candle smoke, and the echo of Vanessa's screams still lingered faintly in the marble halls. Guests whispered as they left, some shaking their heads in disgust, others pressing my hands, murmuring words of sympathy. But for us, for my family, the world had narrowed to a small circle. Daniel, on his knees clutching Ethan, Grace standing close with silent strength, and me, watching them with a heart that was both shattered and mending. That night, when we returned home, the silence was heavy. Daniel carried Ethan upstairs, his hand never leaving the boy's small back, as though letting go for even a second might risk losing him. I followed, my steps slow, my chest tight. In Ethan's room, Grace sat by his bedside, reading softly until his eyes fluttered shut. She smoothed his hair with tender fingers, whispering, You're safe now, sweetheart. I promise. For the first time in months, Ethan slept soundly, his toy car tucked under his pillow, a faint smile on his lips. I lingered in the doorway, tears burning my eyes. Emily would never see this moment, never see her son grow, never hear his laughter again. But in Grace's gentle care, I felt her spirit alive. Downstairs, Daniel sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. I placed a cup of tea before him, my own hands trembling. He looked up, his face pale, his eyes rimmed red. Mom, he whispered, his voice breaking. I failed him. I brought that woman into our lives. I led her near my son. I should have seen it. I touched his shoulder, my voice soft but steady. Daniel, love blinds us. We all wanted to believe there could be happiness again. But what matters is that you opened your eyes before it was too late. He swallowed hard, tears slipping down his cheeks. Ethan deserves better. He deserves someone who truly loves him. His eyes lifted, glancing toward the stairs where Grace had gone. A flicker of something, gratitude, maybe something deeper, shone in them. Days turned into weeks. The scandal of that disastrous wedding spread quickly. through neighbors, relatives, even strangers. The phone rang constantly, some blaming, some sympathizing, all gossiping. But within our home, silence and healing slowly replaced chaos. Grace became Ethan's anchor. She packed his lunches with care, leaving little notes and smiley faces. She walked him to school, held his hand, and told him stories that chased away the shadows. Sometimes I caught Daniel watching her when she wasn't looking. His eyes filled not just with gratitude, but with something unspoken, something that might one day become love. One quiet evening, as we all sat around the table with bowls of pasta steaming before us, Ethan looked up, his clear eyes shining. "Grandma," he said softly, "can Aunt Grace be my mommy now?" The room fell silent. Grace blushed, lowering her gaze. Daniel froze, tears welling in his eyes. I reached across the table, squeezing Ethan's small hand. "Family isn't always about who we lose, my love," I whispered. "It's about who stays, who protects us, who loves us with all their heart." Ethan smiled faintly, then leaned against Grace's arm, content and safe. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone by the window. The moonlight spilled across the quiet street, silver and soft, reminding me that even after the darkest storm, light always finds a way back. I thought of Emily, her laughter, her kindness, her love. She was gone, but through Ethan's eyes, through Grace's care, she still lived. And I thought of Vanessa, how envy and bitterness had devoured her until she became capable of harming an innocent child. The lesson burned clear in my heart. Love is not possession, not masks or grand displays. True love is sacrifice, patience, and care, the quiet kind that saves lives and heals wounds. So to you, listening to my story, I ask, what would you have done if you had been in my place? Would you have kept silent to preserve the illusion of peace, or spoken the truth to protect those you love? Because in the end, courage is not loud. Sometimes it is as simple as lifting a tablecloth, finding the danger hidden beneath, and saying, "Enough." Remember this, family is not always bound by blood. It is bound by love, by the choice to protect, by the strength to stand when darkness closes in. And it is kindness, the smallest act, the simplest word, that carries us through nights that feel endless. I hope my story lights a candle for you. Because if we have the courage to love and protect, even after betrayal, then there is always hope. Always.